It remembers every single thing you have ever seen, everything you have ever heard. You've heard people say, don't load that in your brain, you'll overload your brain. Let me tell you something. You cannot overload your brain. It's impossible. Your brain could accept one new fact every second for more than 3 million years before you came close to its capacity. That means you could easily contain all the knowledge of every volume ever written in the history of the world and not overload your brain. It can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. I could take somebody in this room and bring them up here with a blindfold on, have them stand right here, take the blindfold off, scan this audience for 1 second, put the blindfold back on, bring them back 50 years later, make a little hole right here on the side of the head, put a little probe into the hippocampus of the brain, part of the temporal lobe, stimulate it, and he would be able to tell you where everybody in this room had been sitting and what they had on and what they looked like from that 1 second exposure 50 years ago. That's how complete the capture is in your brain. Now, how many people here remember your birthday? Let me just see your hand. Okay, that's almost unanimous. Now, what did your brain have to do in order for you to respond to that question? Well, first of all, the sound waves had to leave my lips, travel through the air, enter your external auditory meatus, travel down to your tympanic membrane, set up a vibratory force, which travel across the ossicles of the middle ear to the oval and round window, setting up a vibratory force in the end of them, which mechanically distorted the microcilia, converting mechanical energy to electrical energy, which travel across the cochlear nerve to the cochlear nucleus at the pontomedullary junction, from there to the superior olivary nucleus, ascending bilaterally up the brainstem through the lateral meniscus to the inferior colliculus and the medial geniculate nuclei, across the thalamic radiations to the posterior temporal lobes to begin the auditory processing, from there to the frontal lobes, coming down the tract to Victor Drew, retrieving the memories from the mammary bodies down to the, and so on and so forth. And that's the simplified version of what your brain had to do. See if you can get one of those rap singers to do that. But the fact of the matter is, your brain is capable of so much more than you ever challenge it to do. And there really is no reason to ever utter the words, I can't. Yet, there are so many young people, and particularly in the black community, our young men do not pursue higher education at an appropriate level. They drop out of school. They get in trouble. It is said in America that the young black man is an endangered species. Why do they say that? Because there are more young black men in the penal system than there are in the higher educational system. That's crazy. And everybody knows, when they're in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they're good students just like everybody else. What happens along the way that changes the situation? Well, as they get into those higher grades, they start taking their history book and they start looking through it, and they notice that there's nobody who looked like them who really did anything great. Everybody wants to know, what did their ancestors do? And then they come home, they turn the TV on, and they say, oh, there's somebody who looks like me, playing football, baseball, basketball, rapping in those baggy pants, acting a fool on some sit comedy. And you begin to internalize that as what success is all about. And start putting all that energy into thinking you're going to be the next Michael Jordan or the next Puffy Daddy or somebody like that. By the time you realize that that's not going to happen, you haven't pursued the academic career, what's left? up drives this big black BMW with tinted glass, and out steps this tall guy with furs and jewels and women. Want to be like me? I can show you how to get all this stuff. Besides that, the society owes you something because they sold you a bill of goods. They cheated you. And the next thing you know, you're looking at the news and you see this young man being led away in handcuffs, trying to shield his face from the camera, having committed some heinous crime. And you say, that looks like little Johnny. He was such a good boy. What happened? What happened indeed? It happens every single day, hundreds of times. Little Johnnies who could have been doing great things. But you know what? It didn't have to happen because somebody could have taken little Johnny when he was 6 years old and walked down the streets of this city, and they could have pointed out all kinds of things. They could have given him a black history lesson that he would have never forgotten. They could have started by pointing to his shoes and saying it was Jan Matzliger, a black man, who invented the automatic shoe lasting machine, which revolutionized the shoe industry throughout the world. And when you step on that clean street, you can say it was Charles Brooks, a black man who invented the street sweeper, those machines with the big brushes that clean the streets. And down that street comes a big refrigerated tractor-trailer truck, and you tell them it was Frederick Jones, a black man who invented the refrigeration system for trucks, later adopted for airplanes, boats, and trains. And it comes to a stop at the red light, and you tell it was Garrett Morgan, a black man who invented the traffic signal. You can also tell how he invented the gas mask, saved lots of lives during the war. And while you talk about the war, Henrietta Bradbury, a black woman who invented the underwater cannon, made it possible to launch torpedoes from submarines. And you'll see a beautiful black woman walking down the street. A black man did not invent her, but you can use that opportunity to talk about Madam C.J. Walker, a black woman who invented cosmetic products for women of dark complexion, was the first woman of any nationality in America to become a millionaire on her own efforts. And you'll walk past the hospital and you can talk about Charles Drew and his contributions to blood banking, understanding of the function of blood plasma. Daniel Hale Williams, the first successful open heart surgery in the history of the world, had an operative mortality of less than 1.5%. You look up at the surgical light, Thomas Edison. You didn't know he was black, did you? Well, he wasn't, but his right-hand man, Lewis Latimer, was. And you can tell how Lewis Latimer came up with the filament that made the light bulb work for more than 2 or 3 days, how he invented incandescent fluorescent lighting, did pioneering work in those areas, how he diagrammed the telephone for Alexander Graham Bell, was a tremendous inventor in his own right. Most people have never even heard of him. You'll walk across the railroad tracks, talk about Andrew Beard, the automatic railroad car coupler, spurred on the Industrial Revolution. You can talk about Elijah McCoy, who invented the automatic lubrication system for locomotive engines. In fact, Elijah McCoy had so many inventions, when anything ever came out, people would say, is that a McCoy? Is that the real McCoy? You've heard of that term? You got racist people walking around talking about the real McCoy, don't even know who they're paying homage to. And the point is, I'm just barely scratching the surface. So you can see that young man never had a reason to think that his ancestors didn't play an incredibly important role in the development of the nation and in contributions to the world. And there's no reason that he shouldn't feel fully involved and like there isn't something that he cannot do as well.